She walked in wearing a jacket with a broken zipper and shoes held together by duct tape. Within 3 minutes, the entire gym was laughing at her. Within 60 seconds after that, every single one of them would wish they'd never touched that camera. The morning sun hadn't even fully risen over the city when Brooke Lawson pushed open the heavy glass doors of Ironclad Fitness, widely known as the toughest, most exclusive gym in town. It was the kind of place where local athletes trained for competitions, where influencers filmed their reels, and where the regulars didn't take kindly to strangers who didn't belong. Brooke didn't belong. Or at least, that's what everyone assumed the moment they saw her. She wore a faded gray hoodie, 2 sizes too big, sleeves frayed at the edges. Her leggings had a small tear near the knee. Her sneakers, though clean, were clearly years old, the soles worn thin from use. She carried a single gym bag, patched with silver duct tape along one seam, slung over her shoulder like it weighed nothing, though anyone could tell it'd seen better days, much like its owner appeared to have. Her hair was pulled back into a simple, practical bun. No makeup, no jewelry, just a quiet, unassuming woman in her mid-30s who moved to the gym with the kind of calm, deliberate steps that most people never noticed. But everyone at Ironclad noticed her, for all the wrong reasons. Can I help you? A young front desk attendant with perfectly gelled hair blinked at her like she'd walked in from another planet. I have a membership, Brooke said quietly, sliding her card across the counter. Day pass. The attendant scanned it, clearly surprised it worked, and waved her through with a look that said this should be interesting. Word seemed to travel through the gym floor like electricity. By the time Brooke reached the free weight section, heads were already turning. Whispers followed her like a shadow. A few people pulled out their phones, filming without even trying to hide it. And then there was Trevor Hale. Trevor was Ironclad's undisputed king. 28 years old, sculpted like a Greek statue, a semi-famous fitness influencer with over 2 million followers who documented every rep, every personal record, every grind moment for his adoring audience. He ran the gym floor like he owned it, because in every way that mattered socially, he did. He spotted Brooke setting her bag down near an empty rack, and a slow, cruel grin spread across his face. Hey, everybody, look what wandered in. Trevor announced loudly, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. Laughter rippled to the crowd of onlookers, some uncomfortable, most eager for the show. You sure you're in the right place, sweetheart? The laundromat's 2 blocks down. Brooke didn't respond. She simply knelt down and began unzipping her bag, pulling out a pair of old lifting straps, cracked with age but clearly well cared for. Trevor wasn't done. He strode over, phone already raised by one of his training buddies, capturing every second for the socials. With the toe of his expensive sneaker, he nudged her duct tape bag aside, sending it skidding a few feet across the rubber flooring. Careful. Don't want your trash cluttering up the place, he sneered, and the small crowd around him erupted into laughter again. Still, Brooke said nothing. She simply reached over, retrieved her bag without a flicker of anger on her face, and set it neatly against the wall. That composure, that maddening, unshakable calm, seemed to infuriate Trevor even more. He wanted a reaction. He wanted a story for his followers. A viral moment of dominance to add to his highlight reel. You know what? Trevor said, snapping his fingers as if struck by inspiration. Since you're clearly here to work out, why don't you show us what you've got? That barbell right there. He pointed to a loaded bar resting in the squat rack, stacked heavier than most men in the gym would dare attempt. Nobody's touched that today. Not even me. Go on. Give it a lift. The crowd murmured. Someone let out a low whistle. The weight on that bar was no joke. It was loaded to a number that had made even Ironclad's strongest members walk away shaking their heads just an hour earlier. That bar, one onlooker muttered his friend, Marcus couldn't even budge it off the ground this morning. Trevor crossed his arms, smirking, phones rising all around him like a small forest of glowing rectangles. Well, we're waiting. For the first time since she'd walked through the doors, Brooke Lawson lifted her eyes and looked directly at Trevor. There was no anger in her gaze. No fear, either. Just something quiet and unreadable. Something that, if anyone in that room had looked closer, might look like recognition. All right, she said softly, standing up and rolling her shoulders back. I'll lift it, The laughter in the room shifted, just slightly, into something more like anticipation. Nobody believed she could do it, but everybody wanted to watch her try and fail. Brooke walked toward the bar with slow, measured steps, chalking her hands with practiced ease that seemed strangely out of place for someone people had already written off as a stranger who didn't belong. She stood over the barbell, planted her worn sneakers shoulder-width apart, and gripped the bar. The room went quiet, and in that silence, something in the air shifted, though not one person there yet understood why. The bar hadn't even left the ground yet, and already 3 people in the crowd had stopped smiling. Something about the way she gripped it, the precision, the stillness, made the room feel like it was holding its breath. Then she pulled. Brooke Lawson stood over the barbell, her hands wrapped and chalked, her stance perfectly aligned. To the untrained eye, she looked like any other gym-goer preparing for a lift. But to anyone who had spent years around serious strength training, there was something unmistakably different in the way she positioned her feet, the way her back stayed flat, the way her eyes fixed on a single point ahead of her instead of glancing nervously at the crowd. Trevor folded his arms, smirking at his buddies. "This is going to be good," he muttered, loud enough for his phone's microphone to catch it clearly. Brooke exhaled once, then again, slower, and then, without any fanfare, without any dramatic build-up, she pulled. The bar rose off the ground, not shakily, not with the trembling strain that afflicted even strong men attempting personal records. It rose with a clean, controlled fluidity, hips driving forward, shoulders back, the weight settling into her frame like it was an old, familiar friend rather than a punishing burden. The room fell dead silent. Someone's phone actually slipped from their hand and clattered to the floor. Forgotten. A few gym-goers who had been mid-set on nearby machines stopped entirely, weights left hanging mid-rep as they turned to stare. Brooke locked the deadlift out at the top, held it for a clean 2-second pause, the kind of controlled pause that competition judges look for, and then lowered the bar back down with the same effortless precision. Nobody laughed now. Trevor's smirk had frozen on his face. His arms still crossed, but his knuckles noticeably tighter. That's a fluke," he stammered, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. "Beginner's luck. Probably adrenaline." Brooke straightened up, rolled her wrists once, and looked at him with the same calm expression she'd worn since walking through the doors. "Would you like to see it again?" she asked. "Heavier this time?" A ripple of astonished murmurs spread through the crowd. Somebody near the back whispered, "Is she serious?" She was. Without waiting for Trevor's response, Brooke walked to the weight rack and began loading additional plates onto each side of the bar. 25 pounds on each side, then another 25, her movements efficient and practiced, like she'd done this exact routine 1,000 times before in a life very different from the one her worn-out clothes suggested. By the time she finished, the barbell was loaded well beyond anything Ironclad's strongest members had touched in months. Even the gym's most dedicated powerlifters, the ones who competed regionally, who posted their max lifts proudly online, exchanged nervous glances. "That's over 400 pounds, someone breathed. Trevor's face had gone pale beneath his tan. He opened his mouth as if to protest, to call the whole thing off, but the crowd around him had already shifted. Nearly every phone in the gym was now raised, capturing the moment. This wasn't about mocking the poor cleaner anymore. This was about witnessing something nobody in that room had expected. Brooke approached the bar a second time. She didn't rush. She took a slow breath, chalked her hands once more, and settled into position with the same unshakable calm. And then she pulled again. The bar rose off the ground, slower this time, requiring visibly more effort, her forearms tensing, the muscles along her back and legs engaging with obvious strain. But it rose. Inch by inch, it rose, until she stood fully upright. The barbell locked out her hips, her jaw set, her breathing controlled despite the immense weight she now held. The gym erupted, not with laughter this time, but with stunned applause, gasps, and a chorus of disbelieving voices, all talking over one another. Someone shouted, "No way!" Another voice cried out, "Did you see that?" Phones that had been raised to mock her now captured something entirely different, a moment that would ripple far beyond the walls of ironclad fitness. Brooke set the bar down gently, stepped back, and allowed herself the smallest, quietest exhale of relief. Her hands trembled faintly, not from weakness, but from the release of tension after an effort that would have injured most people in that room. Near the back of the gym, an elderly janitor named Walter had stopped his sweeping entirely. He stood frozen, mop handle forgotten in his weathered hands, staring at Brooke with an expression that mixed disbelief with something deeper, recognition, and perhaps even grief. He took a slow step forward, his voice barely above a whisper, but in the sudden quiet of the stunned Jim, it carried further than he intended. Brooke Lawson? The name landed like a stone dropped into still water. A few older gym members, the ones who follow competitive powerlifting circuits, turned sharply toward Walter, then back to Brooke, disbelief spreading across their faces. Brooke turned toward the old janitor, and for the first time since she'd walked through those doors, something cracked in her composed expression. Not anger, not embarrassment, but the raw vulnerability of someone whose carefully buried past had just been spoken aloud in front of a room full of strangers. "It's been a long time, Walter," she said softly. Trevor Hale, still standing frozen near the rack, felt the blood drain from his face as a name settled into his memory, too, a name he recognized far better than anyone else in that gym, though for reasons he desperately hoped nobody would ever uncover. One name. That's all it took to turn a room full of mockery into stunned silence. But what Walter said next would reveal that Brooke Lawson wasn't just a name from the past. She was a legend the sport had tried to forget, and Trevor Hale knew exactly why. The gym had gone eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. Dozens of eyes shifted back and forth between Brooke and Walter, waiting for someone to explain what was happening. Walter set his mop against the wall and walked closer, his old knees creaking with each step. But his eyes never left Brooke's face. "I used to watch you compete," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Nationals 6, 7 years back. You broke records nobody thought could be broken. You were unstoppable." A young woman near the squat rack pulled out her phone, typing furiously. Within seconds, she gasped, "Oh my God, she's real. Brooke Lawson. She was ranked #1 in the country, multiple national titles. She basically vanished after." The woman stopped herself, glancing nervously at Brooke. "After my accident," Brooke finished quietly, her voice steady but distant, like she was reciting facts about someone else's life rather than her own. Murmurs spread to the crowd as more people searched their phones, faces lighting up with recognition, then confusion, then something like guilt as they realized that they'd been laughing at only minutes earlier. 6 years ago, Brooke Lawson had been at the absolute peak of competitive powerlifting. She'd built her career from nothing, a determined young woman from a working-class family who trained in a cramped garage gym before earning her way onto the national stage. She'd broken multiple state and national records, earned sponsorships, and was being talked about as a future world champion. Then, during a high-profile competition, disaster struck. Attempting a max-effort lift that would have set a new national record, something went catastrophically wrong. Her form broke under the immense weight, and in front of a packed arena and rolling cameras, she suffered severe injury that tore through her lower back and hip. The injury itself was devastating enough, but what came after was worse. Someone in the crowd that day, a spectator with a phone, had captured the entire failed lift and the horrifying moment of injury in vivid, unforgiving detail. Instead of treating the footage with the sensitivity such a moment deserved, it was edited, set to mocking music, and uploaded online with a cruel caption ridiculing her form and her pain. The video went viral for all the wrong reasons. What should have been a moment of sympathy and support for an athlete who'd given everything to her sport became a punchline. Comment sections filled with jokes. Other creators duet and reacted to it, adding their own mockery. The narrative twisted until people who had never lifted a weight in their lives were laughing at Brooke Lawson's worst moment. Stripped of all context, reduced to a meme. Brooke had spent the following 2 years in and out of surgeries, physical therapy, and quiet isolation, watching her name become a punchline, while she could barely walk without assistance. Sponsors dropped her. Competitions moved on without her. The sport she'd sacrificed everything for seemed to forget she'd ever existed, except as a cautionary joke. "I didn't disappear because I wanted to," Brooke said now, her voice carrying clearly through the silent gym. "I disappeared because there was nothing left for me to come back to. Everyone had already decided who I was based on 60 seconds of the worst moment of my life." Walter nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "But you kept training," he said. "Didn't you? All this time?" Brooke gave a small, tired smile. "Every single day. In whatever gym would let me in, whenever I could afford it. Nobody was watching anymore, so I trained just for me, to prove to myself I could still do it, not for anyone else." The crowd had grown even larger now, drawn by the commotion. Phones still recording, but with an entirely different energy than before, reverence replacing ridicule. But Walter wasn't finished. His expression shifted, the warmth in his eyes hardening into something closer to anger as his gaze drifted toward Trevor Hale, who had gone unusually quiet, edging backward toward the exit, as if hoping to disappear into the crowd. "There's something else," Walter said, his voice lower now, but no less clear. "Something you should all know about that video. About who actually filmed it." Every head in the gym turned toward Trevor. His face had gone pale, sweat beating at his temple despite the gym's air conditioning. "Walter, don't," he started. But the old janitor was already speaking, unwilling to stay silent any longer after 6 years of watching this injustice fester. "That footage," Walter said, pointing a weather finger directly at Trevor. "The one that destroyed her career, the one that turned her pain into a joke that followed her for years. Trevor was the one who filmed it, and he was the one who posted it." 6 years of silence. 6 years of a stolen reputation, a shattered career, and jokes made at the expense of someone's worst moment of pain. And now, standing in the very gym he ruled like a king, Trevor Hale was about to learn that some secrets don't stay buried forever. The accusation hung in the air like a physical weight, pressing down on every person in that gym. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then, all at once, the murmurs erupted into a wave of shocked whispers and gasps. "Wait, what? Trevor filmed that?" That was him. Trevor's composure, the same arrogant confidence that had defined him throughout the entire encounter, crumbled in an instant. That's not. "You don't know what you're talking about, old man," he stammered, but his voice cracked with panic that betrayed the truth far more convincingly than any denial could hide. Walter shook his head slowly, unmoved by Trevor's protests. "I was there that day too, remember? Working security at that competition, before I ever came to this gym. I saw you in the crowd with your phone out, laughing while she was on the ground in agony. I saw you upload it that same night, bragging to your friends about how many views it would get." The gym had transformed into something resembling a courtroom. Dozens of eyes locked onto Trevor, judgment forming rapidly on every face. The very phones that had been raised to mock Brooke minutes earlier were now capturing Trevor's unraveling with equal intensity. A young man near the front, one of Trevor's regular training partners, lowered his phone slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to disgust. "Dude," he said quietly, "is that true?" Trevor's eyes darted around the room, searching for any ally, any escape route, but found only accusing stares closing in from every direction. It was 6 years ago. He finally snapped, defensive anger replacing his earlier bravado. "It was just a video. I didn't force her to lift wrong. I didn't make her get hurt. You just profited from it," Brooke interrupted, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge now. "You took the worst moment of my life, the moment I lost everything I'd worked for since I was 16 years old, and you turned it into content, into views, into likes and shares and jokes." She stepped closer to him, and despite her worn clothes, despite the duct tape bag still resting against the wall, there was nothing small or insignificant about her presence anymore. The whole gym could see it now. The poise, the discipline, the quiet strength of someone who had survived something unimaginable and rebuilt herself anyway. "Do you know what happened after that video went viral?" Brooke continued, her voice steady even as raw emotion flickered beneath the surface. "I couldn't leave my house for months without people recognizing me and laughing. My own training partners distanced themselves because they didn't want to be associated with the joke. I lost sponsorships overnight. I lost my sense of identity. I spent 2 years in physical therapy, relearning how to walk without pain, while millions of people online were still sharing that video, still adding new captions, still finding new ways to mock a moment that nearly ended my life." Trevor said nothing, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the floor, unable to meet the gazes now surrounding him from every direction. And the worst part, Brooke added quietly, is that I never even knew who filmed it. I always assumed it was some random stranger in the crowd. I never imagined it would be someone who'd go on to build an entire career off pretending to inspire people in gyms just like this one. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Trevor Hale, the influencer who built his entire platform around motivation, discipline, and grinding toward greatness, had built part of his early online following on the back of someone else's genuine tragedy. A woman near the back, phone still raised, spoke up, her voice trembling with anger. I remember that video. I used to think it was funny too, before I knew any better. God, I feel sick. More voices joined in. People recalling the video, admitting with growing shame that they had laughed at it, shared it, never once considering the real person behind those 60 seconds of pain. Trevor, cornered by the weight of his own history finally catching up to him, tried one last, desperate deflection. Everyone shared it. Everyone laughed. Why is it suddenly all on me? Because you filmed it, Walter said firmly. Because you posted it. Because you knew exactly what you were doing, and you did it anyway for the views. The silence that followed was different from before, heavier, charged with a collective reckoning rippling through the crowd. Dozens of people who had laughed just minutes earlier now stood in uncomfortable, guilty silence, forced to confront their own complicity in a cruelty that had spanned years. All eyes turned back to Brooke, waiting to see what she would do next, waiting to see if the woman they had humiliated, the woman whose greatest tragedy had been turned into a joke, would finally have her moment of revenge. But Brooke Lawson had never come to ironclad fitness, seeking revenge. Everyone expected an explosion, a public takedown, a moment of sweet, satisfying revenge, captured on dozens of phones for the whole internet to see. What Brooke Lawson did instead left the entire gym speechless in a way no viral video ever could. The gym waited, breath held collectively, for Brooke's response. Trevor stood frozen, humiliation and fear etched across his face, fully expecting the woman he had wronged not once but twice. First through his cruelty 6 years ago, and again just minutes earlier, to finally unleash the anger he so clearly deserved to face. But Brooke simply exhaled long and slow, and looked around the gym to see of faces staring back at her, some ashamed, some still in disbelief, all waiting. I'm not going to stand here and tear him apart, she said quietly, and a ripple of surprise passed through the crowd. Not because he doesn't deserve accountability. He does. What he did was cruel, and it caused real damage to my life that took years to recover from. She paused, glancing down briefly at her worn sneakers before lifting her gaze again, steady and clear. But I didn't spend 6 years rebuilding myself, piece by piece, session by session, just to become someone who tears others down the way I was torn down. That's not the comeback I trained for. Trevor's expression shifted from fear to something like confused disbelief, as if he couldn't quite process being shown mercy he clearly hadn't extended to her. Brooke turned to address the wider crowd now, her voice carrying easily through the silent gym. 6 years ago, I lost everything in an instant. My career, my identity, the future I thought I was building since I was 16 years old. And for a long time, I let that video define me too. I let the laughter define me. I stopped training. I stopped believing there was any point in trying again if this was how the world would remember me. She glanced toward Walter, who watched her with quiet pride, his weathered face soft with emotion. But somewhere along the way, I realized something. The people laughing at that video didn't know me. They knew 60 seconds of my worst moment. Stripped of everything else, the years of work, the sacrifice, the love I had for what I did. They didn't get to decide who I really was. Only I got to decide that. She looked directly at the crowd, many of whom had phones still raised, capturing every word now not out of mockery, but out of something closer to reverence. So I started training again, quietly, without an audience, without sponsors or records or anyone watching. I trained because I needed to prove something to myself, not to anyone else. And somewhere in that process, I stopped needing anyone's approval to know my own strength. Brooke walked over to her gym bag, the same one Trevor had kicked aside less than 15 minutes earlier, and picked it up gently, almost affectionately, as though it represented something far more significant than its worn, duct-taped exterior suggested. "This bag has been with me through every setback of the last 6 years," she said. "Every failed lift, every painful physical therapy session, every moment I wanted to quit. It's not much to look at. Neither am I, apparently, at first glance." A small, wry smile crossed her face, and a few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Not mocking laughter this time, but something warmer, more human. But what's inside someone, what they've overcome, what they've fought through, that's never something you can judge from the outside. I hope everyone in this room remembers that the next time you're tempted to laugh at someone because of how they look, or what they wear, or what bag they carry into a gym. She turned back to Trevor, who still hadn't moved, still hadn't spoken. "I'm not going to demand you get banned from this gym, or destroy your career the way mine was destroyed," Brooke said, her voice softening slightly, though the resolve in it never wavered. "That's not who I want to be. But I hope you think seriously about the harm you've caused. Not just to me, but to how many other people you might have hurt along the way for a few extra views." Trevor swallowed hard, his usual bravado entirely gone now, replaced by something raw and far more human. Genuine shame. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, the words seeming to cost him considerable effort. "I mean it. I never really thought about what happened to you after that video. I just thought about the views." "I know," Brooke said simply. "That's exactly the problem." She turned back to the crowd, many of whom were visibly moved, some wiping tears away, others simply staring at her with newfound respect. "I came here today just to train, like I do every day wherever I can. I didn't come here for any of this. But there's one thing I hope you all take away for what happened this morning. It's this. Everyone you meet is carrying something you can't see. Everyone deserves a chance to be judged by their strength, not their appearance. And everyone, even the people who hurt us, deserves a chance to learn and do better." The gym erupted into applause, genuine and heartfelt, a stark contrast to the mocking laughter that had greeted Brooke less than half an hour earlier. Walter stepped forward, embracing her in a warm, fatherly hug, tears openly running down his weathered face. "You did good, kid," he whispered. "Real good." What started as a cruel joke ended up becoming the moment that changed an entire gym and one woman's life forever. But Brooke Lawson's comeback was only just beginning, and its final chapter would prove that some champions rise higher the second time around. News of what happened at Ironclad Fitness spread far beyond the gym's walls within hours. Someone had uploaded a full video of the encounter, not the cruel out-of-context clip that haunted Brooke for 6 years, but the complete story. The humiliation, the record-breaking lift, Walter's emotional recognition, and Brooke's graceful, powerful response to Trevor's public exposure. The video went viral again, but this time for entirely different reasons. Comment sections that had once mocked Brooke Lawson now filled with admiration, apology, and awe. Former competitors, journalists, and fans from her earlier career reached out, many of them expressing regret for how quickly they let the old, cruel narrative replace the truth of who she really was. Ironclad Fitness itself transformed in the weeks that followed. The gym's owner, deeply moved by what had unfolded on his gym floor, personally reached out to Brooke and offered her a permanent membership, free of charge, along with standing invitation to train there whenever she wished. But Brooke wanted something more meaningful than a free membership. She proposed a mentorship program, a space within the gym specifically designed for people who felt intimidated, out of place, or unwelcome in traditional fitness environments. Beginners, older adults returning to exercise after years away, people recovering from injuries, much like she once had, people who, for whatever reason, didn't feel like they belonged in a space built around intimidating displays of strength and status. The gym owner agreed immediately, and within a month, the comeback program was born with Brooke Lawson at heart, guiding newcomers to their first tentative steps back into strength training, sharing not just technique, but the hard-won wisdom of resilience she'd gathered across 6 years of quiet, unseen struggle. Walter, the gym's humble janitor who had first recognized her, became an honorary member of the program too, sharing stories from his decade around competitive lifting, offering encouragement to nervous beginners who reminded him so much of the young champion he'd once watched dominate national stages. As for Trevor, he didn't disappear from the gym entirely. though his public image shifted dramatically. Faced with the consequences of his actions playing out across social media, he issued a public apology, a genuine one, this time without the polish and performance that usually characterize his content. He stepped back from his influencer career for several months, using the time to reflect, and eventually returned to fitness content with a noticeably different tone, one grounded in humility rather than dominance, and notably, one that credited Brooke directly for teaching the lesson he needed most. Brooke's own journey didn't stop at mentorship, either. Word of her incredible strength, untouched it seemed by 6 years away from competition, reached the ears of national powerlifting officials, several of whom had once written glowing profiles about her rise to the top before her injury pulled her from the spotlight entirely. They extended an invitation, a wild card entry into the upcoming National Powerlifting Championships, a chance for Brooke Lawson to reclaim the stage that had once been ripped away from her under the worst possible circumstances. She trained harder than ever in the months that followed, balancing her mentorship responsibilities at Ironclad with rigorous personal training sessions, drawing strength not just from her muscles, but from every person she now guided through their own comebacks. On competition day, the arena buzzed with an entirely different energy than her last appearance there 6 years earlier. This time, there was no viral mockery waiting in the wings, no cruel edit lurking in someone's phone. Instead, there was genuine anticipation, admiration, and outpouring of support from a community that had watched her story unfold with newfound understanding. When Brooke Lawson stepped onto that platform, chalk on her hands, the crowd rose to their feet before she'd even touched the bar. She glanced briefly toward the stands, where Walter sat proudly alongside several of her mentorship students, all of them cheering louder than anyone else in the arena. She approached the bar. She settled into position, exactly as she had that morning at Ironclad Fitness, when nobody had expected anything from the quiet woman in worn-out clothes. And then, with the same unshakable calm that had carried her through humiliation, heartbreak, and years of unseen struggle, she pulled. The bar rose cleanly, smoothly, and locked out at the top to a deafening roar of applause, a new national record, set not by the champion she'd once been, but by the stronger, wiser woman she had become. In the months and years that followed, Brooke Lawson's name became synonymous not just with powerlifting excellence, but with resilience itself. She continued mentoring others long after her competitive career wound down, teaching a simple lesson to everyone she trained, a lesson born from the worst and best moments of her own extraordinary journey. True strength was never about the weight on the bar. It was about the willingness to stand back up again and again, no matter how many times life, or the people in it, tried to keep you down. And that, more than any record or trophy, became Brooke Lawson's lasting legacy.